Hey everyone, my name is Madeline Thomas, and today I am going to be talking to y'all about deaf and sign language. For some of y'all might have encountered a situation like that before, um, being around a deaf person and being uncomfortable or not really knowing what to do. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how we can better understand the deaf. What are the deaf and why should we care anything about communicating with them? The deaf are simply people who cannot hear. Um, that is all there is to it. There's something wrong with their ears and they just can't hear. Other than that, they are just like us. But there is a disconnect between the two worlds just because our world is so hearing centered and their world is not. Um, so, so a little personal story about me and how I got connected with the deaf and learning sign language. When I was about 14 or 15 years old, we had a group started at church and it was called Hands of Praise. And our group started to learn sign language through worship songs that we would perform. And through that, we started to get connected with the deaf community at the church and started learning sign language and being able to communicate better with the deaf. Um, so, um, so through that, I have become very familiar with the deaf community and just understanding the deaf better. I saw this really cool quote from an interpreter named Casey Mink, and he said, "To learn American Sign Language, you have to be taught by a deaf person." And I think that is so true because it's their language, and the best way to learn a new language is from the people that it originates from. I do want to talk to you about why the deaf feel so excluded from the hearing world. Again, like I said before, our world is so hearing centered and theirs is not because they can't hear. So they have to use all of their other senses a lot more, like sight and touch and sensation. So there's just that disconnect there. Just with vocally talking to each other, the deaf really can't do that. They can read lips pretty well, but they cannot speak clearly or hear. I do have this funny article that I found from a woman who is deaf, and she is a mom, and she wrote an article about 10 things that she's tired of people saying to her. Where are you from? You have an accent. I'm sorry, I don't know sign language. You don't look deaf. How do you live without music? My grandfather wears hearing aids and my dog is deaf. Do you know my friend's cousin's deaf neighbor? Why are you ignoring me? Would you ask your mom if? And here she's actually speaking about when she's out in public and she actually has hearing children, and anytime they know that the mom is deaf and her children are hearing, they will come up to her children and basically ask them to interpret for them to communicate. And she said that is really one of her greatest pet peeves, she says here. Wow, you really talk well, and you are deaf. And I think that's funny because I do hear that a lot. People misunderstand me when I talk about the deaf, and they say deaf, and it's deaf with an F that they just can't hear. So just some things that are different between the hearing world and the deaf world, because people think, oh, it's the same world, but it's actually not. So just a few things. This really cool article written by somebody that goes by Moon by the Sea. He just said some few things about the deaf and sign language and deaf culture that people might not understand. And it says just two of the things on here about the proper way to get a deaf person's attention. You don't, jump in front of them and yell at them, because yelling is not going to do anything because they can't hear. So being louder is just kind of rude to them because they still can't hear you and you're just yelling at them. So the correct way to get a deaf person's attention is to do this in front of their face, not in their face, but where they can see you. That's the right way to get a deaf person's attention. And if you're trying to get a group of deaf people's attention, you can actually go to the lights and turn the lights on and off, and that will get them to stop signing, be quiet, although they are already silent, but be quiet, stop signing, and pay you attention. But that is only appropriate when you are getting a group's attention, not a single person. That's considered to be rude. And another thing, to look at their face when they're signing and not their hands. That makes, you get the facial expressions, and most of the time when they're signing, their hands are in front or near their face. So whenever you're looking at your face, you can still see their hands and still see what they're signing, but really they'll be mouthing the words, and also their facial expressions will also let you know what they're saying. And another cool thing about deaf that's different from our hearing world is the deaf can be very direct. In the hearing world, what they say or do might be considered rude, but that's just how their culture goes. The deaf really appreciate hearing, making an effort to learn sign language, even if it's a very small amount. They really appreciate that. So to close us out, I'm talking about 3 things that you could do to get connected with the deaf. Start to learn small amounts of ASL. As long as you can do the alphabet, that's really all you need to know to be able to communicate with the deaf. So you need to start small and grow from there. Another thing is try to get involved into a deaf community. There are deaf communities all over the place. And if you can just try to get involved with one and try to actually learn sign language from the deaf person, then that will probably be the best thing for your learning. And the third thing is to make a small effort to communicate with them in public. So if you see a deaf person in public and you just make an effort to communicate with them, they get so excited when when hearing people try to communicate with them. They really appreciate it, and they get excited when other people sign to them. So thank you very much for your time, and that's just a little bit about the deaf.